I brought life into this world until I learned how to take it away. My name was Ruth, though most never used it. To them, I was the midwife, the healer, or just her. I lived on a Carolina plantation where the air clung heavy with heat and secrets, and the trees whispered stories no one dared say aloud. From the outside, I was trusted, needed. I delivered babies when the master's wife screamed through labor. I held the hands of enslaved women as they brought life into a world built to break it. I knew where every child on that land took its first breath. And in time, I'd learn how to control when they take their last. You see, when people see you only as useful, they forget you're watching, listening, learning. I walked through that house like smoke, seen when needed, invisible when not. That invisibility became my greatest weapon, but I wasn't always like this. There was a time when I truly believed I was chosen by God to ease pain, to catch life before it hit the ground. My hands were steady, my eyes sharp. I knew when a baby was breached just by looking at the mother's belly. I was respected, not loved, never loved, but respected in the way you respect fire. It could burn or save. The mistress depended on me. Pale and proud, she would never admit it, but when her time came, she'd clutch my hand tighter than her husband's. She feared death more than she feared me. I found comfort in that imbalance. The other women on the plantation looked to me for more than deliveries. They came with quiet questions, trembling hands. "Miss Ruth, can you make the bleeding stop? Can you help me sleep through the screams? Can you give me something so he don't come near me tonight?" And always, I gave them what they needed. I never asked why. I knew why, but nothing prepared me for the night I lost my own. He was born under the veil of midnight during a storm that rattled even the master's dogs. I remember holding him against my chest, my heart pounding like thunder. He was light, skinned, like his father. Like the man who came to my quarters when he pleased and walked out without a word. The baby cried strong, lived strong, for 3 days. Then I was called away to help another woman in labor. When I returned, my son was cold. They said it was the fever, said he passed in his sleep, but I saw the bruising on his lips, the emptiness in the mistress's eyes when she handed me the swaddled bundle. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. That night, I sat by the hearth and held his small body, and something in me died too. It was then I began to change. I buried my child behind the smokehouse under a red oak tree. No name carved, no marker, just ash and memory. And I made a vow that day I would never bring another child into this world without knowing who controlled its fate. I would never let the soil of this land claim another piece of my heart. And so I started to listen more closely. Watch more carefully. I started collecting herbs not just for healing, but for other things. I remembered what my grandmother whispered to me as a girl, back when we lived in the swamplands, about roots that could kill a fever. Or kill a man. About teas that could bring peace, or eternal silence. People still came to me with their troubles, and I still helped. But slowly, carefully, I began helping myself. I became more than a midwife. I became the storm that would come for the ones who thought they were gods. If you're still with me, hold tight. This story isn't the one you'll find in textbooks. It's the story they tried to erase with time, fear, and silence. But I remember. So stay to the end. Subscribe if you want more truth buried under American soil. Comment to tell us you're watching. Share if you believe stories like mine deserve to breathe, because what I did next, they still whisper about it when the wind blows through the trees. People think midwives only bring babies into the world, but we also bear witness to the ones we can't save. Her name was Clara, just 12 years old, too young to understand what was happening to her. Old enough to carry the consequences. She came to me one morning, limping, her dress torn, blood on her thighs. She didn't cry, just stared at the ground like her soul had stepped out of her body and gone somewhere safer. I knew before she spoke. I'd seen it too many times. The look, the silence, the shame they didn't even earn. I took her hand and led her to my quarters. Made her a tea that eased the pain, though I had nothing strong enough to ease the memory. She slept in my bed that night. I sat up beside her, watching the candle burn low. I prayed, but not for peace. Not anymore. I prayed for justice, for wrath. By the next week, Clara's belly had started to swell. It was him, the overseer. Tall, red-faced, always drunk by sundown. He'd been watching Clara for months, smiling too long, standing too close. The others had warned her to avoid him, but where could a girl like Clara go? Nowhere. Not on that land. When the mistress found out, she didn't scold the overseer. She scolded Clara, called her filthy, accused her of seduction. A child. 12 seduction, that's how they saw us. Not as victims. Not as children, but as temptations sent to test their husband's will. The master had the overseer whipped for the appearance of justice. Not for Clara, never for Clara. I begged to take the child to another plantation where she could rest until the birth, but the mistress refused. "We don't send problems away," she said. "We deal with them." Clara cried to me every night. She didn't want to have that baby. She was terrified of what it would mean, what it would look like, how she'd carry the weight of it, not just in her body, but forever in her soul. I tried to comfort her, told her she was strong, that she would get through it, but even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. Not because Clara was weak, but because the world around her was too cruel for the truth. Then one morning, I found her gone. They searched the fields, the barns, the river. It was 2 days later that one of the field hands spotted her dress caught in a tree root near the creek. They said she must have slipped, hit her head, but I knew Clara didn't fall. She let go. She let go. Because she thought death was the only escape left. At her burial, they didn't sing. They didn't weep. The master said she was a troubled girl. The mistress didn't even come outside. But I stood there, heart hollowed out, and whispered her name over and over so the wind would carry it somewhere safer than here. Clara, 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 Clara. I promised her then, standing barefoot in the mud, that she would not be forgotten, and that what was done to her would not go unpunished. That's when I began marking the names, not just in my memory, but carved beneath the floorboards of my quarters. Each one, man, woman, overseer, mistress who had ever laid their hands where they shouldn't, each one who had laughed at the tears of the innocent. Each one who said, it's just the way things are. I had healed so many, saved lives, brought comfort, but now I understood the balance was off. Too many of us were dying with our pain unheard. Too many were going into the earth with no one left to speak their names, and so I changed. Clara changed me. I wasn't just a midwife anymore. I was a ledger of pain, keeping score. And one day, I'd collect what was owed. If you feel even a flicker of anger, of sadness, of knowing, then stay with me. Because Clara's story was not the last. Subscribe if these voices matter to you. Comment with their name. Let Clara live again. In truth. In memory. Share this story so someone else might see what was done in silence. And know, the ones they called voiceless were only waiting to speak. I never meant to cross the line, but some lines, they move when your back's against the wall. I kept a shelf in my quarters, bottles, roots, dried herbs, powders. To most, it looked like any other healer. S-table, remedies for colds, for coughs, for childbirth pains. But hidden behind the jars of mint and elderflower was a single bottle, small, dark, and thick as molasses. It held nightshade, not the harmless kind, the deadly one, belladonna. I hadn't touched it in years, had almost forgotten why I'd kept it. But Clara's death brought everything back. The helplessness, the fury. The way we were supposed to grieve quietly if we were allowed to grieve at all. After the burial, something shifted in me. I'd spent my life delivering babies into a broken world, hoping they'd survive long enough to see a sliver of kindness. But kindness wasn't growing here. Not in this soil, not under their boots. And so, I opened the bottle. I didn't use it at first. I just watched it, studied it, measured its weight in my palm. A single drop could slow the heart. 3 could stop it altogether. That's all it would take. 3 drops. I told myself I was keeping it for emergencies, for animals, maybe, or for those beyond saving. But the truth, I was waiting for the right moment, and that moment came faster than I expected. It was late spring. The air was thick with heat and secrets. I was called to the main house to help with the mistress's headaches. She always demanded lavender oils and massages, complaining of Negro noise keeping her from rest. That day, she waved me into the parlor, then stormed off to her room, leaving her tea half finished on the table. I noticed it steaming gently, chamomile. I stood there, staring at that cup for what felt like forever, and the nightshade bottle weighed heavy in my apron. I didn't do it, not that day, but I thought about it, and that scared me. Because thinking about it used to feel dangerous. Now it felt reasonable. Days passed, and I kept the bottle close, tucked inside a cloth pouch, beneath my skirts. My little secret, my quiet insurance policy. Not just for revenge, but for choice, for power. You see, power on a plantation wasn't something we were allowed. It was something you took in pieces when no one was looking. So I began learning more. I watched how the food came into the house, what they ate when they were alone, which dishes were brought up by which hands. I paid attention to the patterns, the careless habits of people who thought themselves untouchable. It wasn't just about killing, it was about knowing how their world worked so one day I could unmake it. And soon I wasn't the only one who knew about the bottle. Miriam, another healer from the quarters, had seen me mix a batch of herbs one night and noticed the vial. She said nothing at first, but later, in the smokehouse, she whispered, "You ever use it?" I didn't answer. She just nodded and said, "If you do, let it be for something righteous." I carried those words like scripture, because I wasn't looking to poison out of spite. I was preparing for when righteousness needed help. And that help wasn't long coming. One night I was summoned again, but not to the house, to the shed behind the barn. Inside, the overseer lay moaning, pale, sweating, his breath shallow. They said he'd eaten something bad. Maybe mushrooms, maybe not. He died before sunrise. They buried him fast. No priest, no fuss. The master said fools shouldn't have eaten from the woods. But I knew. Miriam knew. And neither of us said a word. We didn't smile. We didn't cry. We just looked at the ground and exhaled. Something had shifted that night. A boundary crossed, maybe, or erased. The others noticed too. They started whispering my name differently, not just as Ruth the midwife, but Ruth the one you don't cross. Ruth who has a bottle no one talks about. Ruth who remembers. And when you carry a reputation like that, you don't just walk through shadows, you become one. If you're still here, you're beginning to see. This isn't a story about poison, it's about purpose. About how far you'll go when no one else will protect your people. So subscribe if you're drawn to the forgotten truths. Comment if you've ever held silence when you wanted to scream. And share this story, because even whispers deserve to be heard. There are cries you never forget. Not the screams of punishment, not the sobs of mourning. I mean the cries that tear the world in two. The first breath of a child slipping into this broken life. That morning, the fog clung to the trees like old ghosts. I was called to the quarters to help with a birth, but not just any birth. This was Lena, a girl of 16, barely more than a child herself. Hair belly stretched tight, her eyes wide with fear. "Is it time?" she whispered when I entered. I nodded and knelt beside her. "It's time, baby, but you're not alone." I'd helped bring nearly 100 babies into this world. Each one left a mark on me, some filled with hope, others with heartbreak. But Lena's labor was different. The pain came fast. Her body trembled. Sweat poured down her face. The women gathered around her, humming low, holding her hands, brushing her hair back. And through it all, I whispered the same words I always did. "Breathe, child. Let the pain pass through. You are a river, and the river never breaks." Hours passed. The sun climbed. Lena screamed once, then again, and then silence. The child was not breathing. My hands moved without thinking. I rubbed its back, cleared its nose, tapped the soles of its feet. Still nothing. My heart thundered. "Don't you leave us," I whispered. "Not today. Not this one." I pressed my lips to its chest and breathed once, twice. Then it happened. A gasp, a cough, a weak whimpering cry. The women broke into tears, laughter, prayers. Lena collapsed in relief. I wrapped the baby in cloth and held it high for all to see. "A girl," I said, "and a fighter." But that was only the beginning. That night, after the others had gone, I sat beside Lena with the baby in my arms. The fire crackled low. Outside, the frogs sang, unaware of the miracle that had unfolded. "You saved her," Lena whispered. "No, child," I said. "You did." But something shifted in me that night. Not because I'd saved a life, but because I'd nearly lost one. No, that baby could have died for no reason. Like Clara, like so many others. And there'd be no justice, no consequence. Just another soul swallowed by silence. I stared into the flames and thought about the bottle in my pouch. About the overseer buried without a word, about the poison that was still waiting. I thought about how easily everything could be taken from us, unless we took something first. Weeks passed, but the fire inside me burned brighter. I began to teach Lena, not just how to care for a baby, but how to listen, how to observe, how to know. I showed her which herbs soothed pain, which ones lowered fever, which could end a pregnancy quietly when there was no other mercy. She was sharp, quiet, but sharp. One evening, while we prepared teas, she asked, "Ruth, what if I want to learn the other things too?" I looked up. "What other things?" She tapped her finger on the pouch I always kept near. I didn't speak right away, but I didn't say no. Because Lena had seen the world for what it was. And once you see the truth, you don't unsee it. You act. That same month, a new field hand arrived as a keel. Broad, shouldered, soft-spoken, eyes like storm clouds. The other said he was from a neighboring plantation that burned in a lightning storm. Said he'd been chained for 3 days before someone found him. He said little, but he watched everything. And he noticed me. One night, as I handed him a poultice for his cracked hands, he leaned in and whispered, "Word is, you've helped people who couldn't help themselves." I said nothing. He nodded. "If that's true, then maybe it's time someone helped you." That's when I knew. This story wasn't mine alone anymore. The circle was growing, and something bigger than healing was taking root. If you've made it this far, then maybe you see what's building. The pain, the patterns, the quiet defiance. Keep going with me. Don't look away now. Subscribe to this channel. Comment if someone in your family ever carried a burden no one else saw, and share this story, because the fight for dignity is never just one woman's battle.
I used to think I was alone in my rage, that what lived in my chest, this burning, choking thing, was mine and mine alone. But pain has a way of recognizing itself in others, and slowly, surely, it began to gather. It started with Ezekiel. He didn't just work hard, he worked with purpose. Every stroke of the hoe, every step through the rows was precise, controlled, like a man storing up something he couldn't yet release. One night he came to my cabin after the moon had climbed high. He didn't knock, just stood in the doorway like he'd always belonged there. "I've been watching you," he said, "and I think we want the same thing." I didn't answer. Just stepped aside and let him in. He sat across from me, and for a long time we didn't speak. The only sound was the fire and the wind outside. Then he reached into his shirt and pulled out a small hand-carved figure, a rabbit. My sister carved this before she died, he said. The master's son threw her in the river. She couldn't swim. I took the figure gently. The detail was fine, the edges worn smooth. It had been held in grief, over and over. She was 10, he added. That night the circle was born. Next came Jonah. He was old, his back bent, his eyes clouded. Most thought he was harmless, half mad. But one day I saw him sitting by the old well, muttering to himself. As I passed, I heard him say, "They buried the poison under the cypress root. Thought no one would know." I stopped. "What poison?" He looked up slowly. "The kind that doesn't leave marks." It took time, but I gained his trust. Turned out, Jonah had once worked the kitchen before his tongue got loose, and they sent him back to the fields. But he remembered things, recipes, herbs, combinations. He became our memory. Then there was Bessie, big, loud, always laughing too hard, crying too loud. People dismissed her, but I saw through it. She was watching, always watching. One day she came to me with a torn dress and bruises on her arms. "They said I fought back," she whispered. "I don't even remember doing it, but my hands were bloody." I cleaned her up, sat her down, gave her tea to calm her. Then I showed her the circle, not all at once, just a piece. A whisper. Her eyes narrowed. "You mean like?" "A reckoning," I nodded. She didn't hesitate. "Then I'm in." Over weeks we grew. 1 became 5. 5 became 9. Each person brought something: strength, knowledge, anger, access. We met under the old pecan tree. We spoke in riddles. We passed notes in laundry baskets. We trained our bodies during labor, practiced signaling with our hands while hanging clothes. We weren't just plotting, we were preparing, and we had rules. Rule 1, never speak the full plan aloud. Rule 2, no one acts alone. Rule 3, if one falls, the rest move forward, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming something they thought they'd stolen for good. Then came the test. One night, a boy named Jacob, a stable hand barely 17, was caught stealing extra cornmeal. He wasn't hungry. He was feeding his sick grandmother. The master found out. He ordered a public whipping, said it would be educational. They tied Jacob to the post behind the barn, lined us up to watch, said if anyone turned away, they'd join him. I held Lena's hand so tight I thought her fingers might snap. The whip cracked. Jacob didn't scream. The second time he did. On the third lash, Bessie stepped forward. My heart stopped. "Master," she said sweetly, "that's a good angle you got there. Mind if I try?" There was a beat of silence. The master laughed, handed her the whip. She walked behind Jacob, then dropped the whip at his feet and spat on the ground. "I'm not your dog." We were sure she'd die. But something happened. The overseer laughed again, said, "Let the pig squeal, she'll learn." And they let her go. That night under the pecan tree, the circle swore anew. We would not wait to be spared, we would act. And to you watching this, yes, you, I ask, do you think we were wrong? Do you believe silence would have saved us? Because history forgets the quiet ones, but it fears those who find their voice. Loudspeaker, share this story if you feel the power in it. Speech balloon, comment below. Have you ever stood up when it mattered most? Pushpin and subscribe, because this circle is only growing and the fire is still burning. The floor beneath my bed wasn't just wood anymore. It was a map. Each creak had been catalogued, each loose board memorized. And under one I had carved out a hollow space barely big enough for a tin cup and a roll of parchment. But that parchment, it held everything. The entire plan, our plan, sketched in symbols only we could understand. Because you see, escape was never the goal. Reckoning was. We didn't want to run. We wanted them to feel it. To know, just for one moment, what it was like to live in fear of us. Each member of the circle had a part to play. Ezekiel worked the fields closest to the road. He knew when supply wagons came and went. He'd mark the dirt with a stick if a stranger arrived. 2 lines if armed, 3 if dangerous. Jonah, old as he was, had access to the root cellar. That meant tools, not weapons tools. A sharpened hoe, a nail-studded mallet. Innocent in the daylight, deadly at night. Bessie, bless her soul, was our signal. Her singing voice carried over the hills. When she sang Wade in the Water, we knew the coast was clear. When she hummed Swing Low, it meant stop everything. Lena was our key to the house. She'd started working inside, folding linens and dusting books. Her eyes were everywhere, reading letters on desks, noting which keys hung where, how often the rifles were cleaned. She was quiet but sharp. One night she whispered, "They keep the gunpowder in the top pantry, hidden behind the flour." We all just stared at her. She smiled. "I might be soft, but I ain't slow." Still, all our planning would have meant nothing without the calendar. Jonah created it. Each full moon was marked with a cross. Each Sunday a circle. We knew the guards drank heavier on Saturdays. We knew the dogs would chain during rain. Every variable, every weakness. Our goal wasn't to kill indiscriminately. That's what they expected us to want. No, our target was fear itself, to make the system shake. To strike with such precision that it wouldn't look like a riot. It would look like judgment. The first test came with fire. A shed abandoned dry as bones. Went up in flames one night. No one saw who did it. The flames were blamed on lightning even though the skies had been clear. But that wasn't the point. The point was this. The overseer didn't sleep for 3 nights after, and we watched. The circle took note. Fire confuses, smoke isolates, and panic slows them down. That was lesson 1. We trained in secret, lifting heavy stones to build strength, practicing silent movement through cane fields. Jonah showed us how to tie slip knots with twine. Bessie made poultices to keep blisters from festering. This was war, but a different kind, a war of shadows. And in those shadows we whispered the names of those we had lost. Little Ruth, Josiah, my own brother Micah. We didn't just prepare our bodies, we sharpened our why, because revenge on its own fades. But purpose becomes fire. We were almost ready, but almost wasn't enough. Then came the letter. Lena found it on the master's desk. She wasn't supposed to be in that room, but she'd taken the risk. Just long enough to glance at the open paper. Selling off stock before winter, that's what it said. And next to it, a list of names. Mine, Ezekiel's, Bessie's, the circle. We weren't just planning anymore. We were on a clock. That night, we buried the parchment deeper under the floorboards and gathered under the pecan tree. I told them about the letter, and silence fell. It wasn't fear, it was resolve. One by one, they nodded. Jonah spat into the fire. Then we strike first. No one argued. The date was set. The night of the first frost. When the dogs wouldn't smell and the air would cover the sound. Everything we were, everything we'd survived, it was all leading here. And now you, watching this, lean in closer, because you've heard whispers, seen headlines, maybe even wondered if any of it was true. Well, it was. The floorboards hid more than dust. They hid revolution. And if this story stirs something inside you, something angry, something proud, then don't let it sit. Speech balloon, drop a comment. Have you ever had to wait for the right moment to fight back? Loudspeaker, share this with someone who thinks resistance is just history. Pushpin and subscribe, because we haven't even gotten to the frost yet. Frost covered the ground like ash. That morning it crunched under boots. The overseer cursed the cold and wrapped his coat tighter. But to us, that frost was a signal, the one we'd waited months for. The sky was overcast, the air sharp, the dogs barely barked. The cold dulled everything, sound, scent, suspicion. It was time. By midday, the plantation buzzed with tension none of them understood. We worked with heads down, lips pressed shut, but inside, we were thunder. Lena left a crack in the pantry door, just enough for someone to slip through later. Jonah made a small mistake stacking wood, blocking the back road with a pile no wagon could pass. Every move had meaning now, even the way we breathed. After sundown, silence settled like smoke. No birdsong, no wind, just the cold. And then Bessie began to sing, wade in the water. Slow, soft, like a lullaby. Her voice trembled just slightly. Only we would notice. It was the go-ahead. One by one, we slipped out. From the quarters, from the sheds, from behind hay bales. I moved through the dark like I'd practiced, hands calloused, heart steady. I was something else. I was what they feared we could become. Jonah met me behind the well with a satchel. Inside, cloth soaked in lime, matches, nails wrapped in burlap. He said nothing, just nodded, then vanished into the dark. Ezekiel was waiting near the stable. Lena already in place, he whispered. We crouched low and moved in sync, silent, slow like ghosts. The path to the house was lined with bare trees. Their limbs looked like claws reaching down. But we didn't flinch. We passed them like shadows. The porch creaked once under my weight, just once. Inside, the lamps burned low. The master had been drinking. 2 empty bottles lay on the table. His snores rumbled through the house like thunder. Ezekiel and I slipped past the parlor. Lena met us at the kitchen door. Her hands trembled only a little. She handed me the key. Top pantry, she whispered. Behind the flour. I found it exactly where she said, 3 pouches of gunpowder neatly tied. This wasn't just about fire, it was about a message. We scattered powder in the corners of the house where the boards were weakest. One trail led to the master's, another to the parlor. But the third led back out the door and across the porch, to the barn. Because this wasn't just about one man. This was about the whole system. The barn held their wealth, their harvest, their tools it had to burn. Bessie stood near the barn, shawl pulled. You sure? She whispered. I didn't answer. I just struck the match. The flame flared golden in the cold. Then I touched it to the powder line, and everything changed. The explosion wasn't big, but it was loud. The porch burst into flames with a thunderclap. The windows shattered. Inside, someone screamed. The house roared alive in terror. That's when Jonah came out of the shadows with his mallet and smashed the water pump. No way to put the fire out now. The overseer stumbled onto the lawn, gun in hand, eyes wide with fear. He saw shadows, heard voices, but couldn't tell friend from enemy. He fired once, then dropped the pistol. His hands trembled too much. Ezekiel moved in behind him quick as lightning. A single blow, the man crumpled. No one spoke. No one cheered. This wasn't revenge. This was declaration. The fire spread fast. Dry wood. Old beams. The cold couldn't stop it now. And as it burned, the slaves on nearby fields watched from the tree line. Silent, still. Witnesses. Some wept. Others stood frozen. But all understood what this meant. It wasn't chaos. It was clarity. By dawn, the house was a black skeleton against the pale sky. We didn't run. We walked. Down the main road. Past the scorched barn. Past the fields we once bled into. We walked into the trees, into the unknown. But not as fugitives, as something new. And you, watching this now, imagine the courage it takes to light a fire that might save others, knowing it might consume you too. That night wasn't the end of our story. It was the beginning of theirs. Those who rose from ash. Those who whispered truth through generations. Those who carried the fire forward. Fire, if this story shook you, tell us in the comments. Bricks and subscribe, because the next part of this journey will test everything we thought we knew. Repeat button, share this, because the frost, the fire, it wasn't just history, it was prophecy. By morning, the plantation was smoke and silence. The once proud manor with its white columns and heavy doors lay in ruin. The barn's charred skeleton still smoldered. The scent of ash clung to everything, and the wind. It didn't whistle, it whispered, like it was carrying the names of the lost. The guilty, the free. We didn't look back, not at first. Our feet carried us through woods we once feared. The same forest they'd threatened to hunt us through if we ever dared escape. But now the trees stood like witnesses, and we walked under them, not as prey, but as something they couldn't name. About 5 miles out, we stopped to rest. Jonah crouched by a creek, washing soot from his arms. Lena tore strips from her apron to bandage Bessie's blistered hands. Ezekiel sat with his head bowed, eyes locked on the horizon. Nobody spoke of what we'd done. Nobody had to. The silence wasn't shame. It was reverence. We knew patrols would come. Not for justice, but for vengeance. They'd see the fire and come running, not to save, but to punish. That gave us 3 choices: hide, split up, or keep moving. I looked at their faces. Faces I'd worked beside in cotton fields, shared cornbread with, buried loved ones beside. I couldn't abandon them. We moved north, I said. Together, no one argued. 3 days into the woods, it rained. Cold. It soaked through clothes, through bone, through hope. Naomi, the youngest among us, sobbed quietly beneath a tree. Her brother David tried to keep her warm. Lena wrapped them in her shawl and sang softly. An old hymn, cracked and broken like our bodies. But it held us. That song held us. Somewhere near the Carolina border, we found the cabin. Abandoned, moss-covered, half-fallen. But to us it was a temple. We patched holes with bark, gathered berries, caught rainwater. Jonah even fashioned crude fishing hooks from bent nails. It wasn't much, but it was survival. One night, while the others slept, I sat by the fire and stared into the flames. They reminded me of that night. The match, the powder, the heat. Had we gone too far? Had we become the monsters they painted us to be? But then I remembered Naomi's tears, the whip scars on Jonah's back, Lena's broken tooth. Rumors drifted in with travelers. Whispers of uprisings, runaways forming camps in the hills, towns beginning to question the old order. We listened, we watched, but we stayed quiet. Our goal was never chaos. It was safety, freedom, dignity. One day a stranger arrived at the cabin. He was dark-skinned, older, with a wide-brim hat and eyes that had seen things. He introduced himself as Elijah, said he walked the underground road. Been hearing about what y'all did, he said with a grin. Lit a fire big enough to be seen in 3 counties. My breath caught. You here to turn us in? I asked. He laughed. Turn you in? Boy, you legends now. Elijah stayed a few days, taught us how to move safer, where to find friendly faces, which rivers to follow. Before leaving, he gave me a map, hand-drawn, wrinkled, but priceless. This'll get you to Kentucky, he said. From there, paths to Canada open up. Canada, cold shore, but nobody owns nobody up there. He tipped his hat and vanished into the trees, like a ghost or an angel. We talked about it that night. Could we really leave? Was it safer to stay in hiding or chase a future we'd only dreamed about? In the end, Naomi decided it for us. I want to learn to read, she said. Can't do that hiding forever. And just like that, the path was chosen. So we packed up what little we had, some cornmeal, firewood, Lena's hymn book. And we walked again, not just from the cabin, but toward something. We walked toward a future we had no map for, only hope. And you watching this, have you ever walked into the unknown, with nothing but stories and bruises and a prayer? That's what freedom felt like for us, not a moment, but a journey, and that journey isn't over. Because the fire we lit didn't just burn a house, it sparked a movement. Fire, if this story moved you, share it. Speech balloon, comment what freedom means to you. Push pin and subscribe, because the next steps in our journey will take us places you won't believe. This isn't just about escape. It's about what comes after the fire. Freedom didn't taste the way I imagined. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't even loud. It was quiet, dry, like cracked lips in winter air and boots full of river mud. Like breathing without asking permission. We weren't free the moment we left. We were chasing it through forests, frost, and fear. And the path we followed? It wasn't lit by lanterns. It was lit by memory. We followed the map Elijah gave us, but it was barely more than lines and names. Creek Bend, Fallen Sycamore, Beware Dogs near Dalton Farm. It was enough. We moved at night. Slept during the day, hidden beneath brush and barns and the thickest woods you've ever seen. Sometimes we stole food, sometimes strangers gave it, and sometimes we just went hungry. One night we came upon a cabin tucked deep in the wood. It belonged to a white woman named Hattie, gray-haired, slow-moving, eyes sharp as broken glass. She opened her door with a shotgun but lowered it the moment she saw us. "You're the ones from Jasper County," she whispered. "Come in." She fed us biscuits, bandaged Naomi's foot, and let us sleep in her barn. "I got no love for the men that owned you," she said, "but be warned. Freedom don't come free. It's earned every single mile." She was right. A week later, we were nearly caught. Crossing a narrow road near dawn, a patrol spotted us. 3 men on horseback, rifles raised. We scattered. I remember the whistle of bullets through trees, Naomi screaming, Lena stumbling over roots, Jonah grabbing her hand, refusing to let go. We ran like animals. Like our lives depended on it. Because they did. We hid in a cave for 2 days. Cold, wet, barely breathing. We didn't light a fire, didn't speak, we just listened. For dogs, for hooves, for the sound of chains chasing us down. But they never came. And when we finally crawled back into the light, we didn't speak of what almost happened. We just kept walking. Somewhere near Tennessee, we met a preacher, tall, brown-skinned, coat too thin for the season. He introduced himself only as Brother Clem. "I don't ask what you've done," he said. "Only where you're headed," we told him. He nodded. "Then let the Lord guide your feet." He sang as he walked, loud, defiant, full of fire. We didn't know the words, but we hummed along. It felt like hope. We crossed rivers waist-deep in cold. We passed towns that smelled of smoke and suspicion. We lost Naomi's doll somewhere near the Ohio line. She cried. I almost did too. But Lena said something that stuck. "Leave behind what weighs you. The memory stays." Then came the night the stars vanished. A storm rolled in so dark, so violent, we thought the sky was angry. Rain pounded the earth like judgment. Thunder shook our bones. We huddled beneath a fallen log. I wrapped Naomi in my coat. Jonah curled around the others like a shield. And in that moment I wondered, was this what freedom felt like? Wet, terrified, alone. But then Lena whispered, "We still breathing, ain't we?" And we all laughed right into the storm. When the clouds cleared, we could see the river. The big one, the one Elijah said would carry us north if we followed it long enough. It looked endless. It looked possible. So we followed. Some days we sang to keep rhythm. Some days we cried because the silence was too heavy. And some days we didn't know if we'd make it. But still, we walked. And if you're watching this, maybe you've never had to run for your life. Maybe you've never walked a path with no guarantees, only grit. But the ones who did, they carved freedom with bleeding feet. So don't let their journey be forgotten. Folded hands, share this story if it moved you. Speech balloon, leave a comment if you've ever had to fight for something that mattered. Pushpin, subscribe for more hidden histories that deserve to be heard. We weren't just escaping chains. We were walking toward a future no one thought we deserved. The river looked wide enough to swallow the world. Gray, cold, moving fast. This was the line Elijah had spoken of, the one that separated what we were from what we were becoming. Freedom wasn't on the other side. Not entirely, but it was closer. We followed its bank for 3 days, sleeping in hollows, eating what we could gather, drinking from the same river we feared. It was Jonah who found the raft. Old, waterlogged. Tied up under some brush like someone had meant to return for it and never did. "Will it float?" I asked. Jonah grinned. "Only one way to find out." We patched it with branches, tied it with strips from my shirt. It wasn't much, but it was something, enough to carry us, maybe, enough to try. Crossing was the only option. If we followed the bank any longer, we risked being spotted. The story said slave catchers waited near the border towns, hoping to snatch runaways back across. The raft was our gamble, and I hated gambling. The night we launched, the moon was thin, fog curled along the water like fingers. Naomi clutched my hand. "Will it tip?" "Not if we're lucky," I said. Lena snorted. "Let's hope God likes us tonight." Pushing off was easy. Staying afloat was not. The current tugged us like a child playing with a toy. The raft creaked. Water leaked between the boards, but we moved forward. Halfway across, the fog thickened. We could barely see each other's faces, just shadows, just breath. Then came the sound, oars, not ours. Someone else, close, too close. Jonah whispered, "Get down." We flattened ourselves. I heard voices, 2 men, maybe more, laughing, joking. Bet they tried this way, always do. The boat passed. They didn't see us, but we didn't breathe until they were gone. The river was kind that night, tired maybe, or maybe it had carried too many stories like ours to resist another one. We reached the far bank just before dawn, cold, shivering, alive. There were no trumpets waiting, no flags. No one to shout, "You're free now." But when my feet touched dry ground, I dropped to my knees. And I wept. We weren't safe yet, but we were closer to safe than we'd ever been. We met others in the woods, travelers like us. A mother with twin sons who hadn't spoken since they saw their father beaten in front of them. Each had stories, scars. Each was running, chasing, dreaming, just like us. And let me tell you something. If you think freedom is a destination, you've never had to run for it, not a place. It's a promise you keep chasing until your legs give out, until the river says enough, until your heart finally whispers, maybe, just maybe, we made it. That night, Lena built a fire, a real one, not hiding, not shivering, and for the first time we told our stories aloud. I told them about the night I saw Naomi born under candlelight and fear. Jonah spoke of his brother who didn't make it out. Lena spoke of her father, the man who never stopped believing they'd be free. And Naomi, she sang a little song, broken tune, but it silenced the woods, and it filled my chest with something I hadn't felt in years, hope. If you're still here listening to this story, then you've felt it too. That ache for justice, that hunger for peace, that need to know the past mattered. So do this one thing for me. Pushpin, hit subscribe. Speech balloon, leave a comment if freedom has ever cost you something. Repeat button, share this story so more people remember. Because the river we crossed didn't just carry our bodies, it carried every name they tried to erase. We didn't walk, we crawled into the north. Every mile was earned with blood, mud, and silence. But we kept going, because in every broken boot sole and empty stomach, we clutched something the South never gave us, the right to hope. A Quaker family in Pennsylvania took us in, strangers at first. White, quiet, careful, but their eyes were kind. They gave us bread and blankets, let us sleep in the attic for 3 nights, and when we left they handed Jonah a slip of paper with a symbol I didn't recognize. "It means go north," the man said. "You'll find others," we did. There were people in the north who risked everything to help us. Abolitionists, preachers, conductors of the Underground Railroad. One woman, Miss Clara, gave us clothes and taught Naomi to read a few letters. Another, a free black man named Mr. Franklin, let us hide in his barn for a week while patrols passed through. Each one added a piece to our survival. Each one believed we were more than property, but not everyone in the north welcomed us. Some towns turned us away. Some people looked at our skin and locked their doors. They didn't use chains, but they used silence. They didn't beat us, but they pretended not to see. That too was its own kind of cruelty. Still, we moved. Every step north felt like unlearning something. Unlearning fear, unlearning shame, unlearning the idea that we had to bow to survive. By the time we reached Rochester, New York, the air felt different, colder, cleaner, not just in weather, but in spirit. We were greeted at a church by a man named Pastor Elijah Ford. He had helped over 200 people escape. When he saw us, he didn't ask where we came from. He asked, "What do you dream of now?" I froze, because I'd never been asked that before. What did I dream of? I didn't know. A cabin, maybe. Land, a place Naomi could laugh without looking over her shoulder. A life where hammers built homes, not shacks for masters. A world where no man owned another. Elijah introduced us to others. A carpenter named Willis, who offered Jonah a job. A seamstress who showed Lena how to stitch for pay. And a teacher named Mrs. Hanley, who promised Naomi a seat in her school. They welcomed us, not as fugitives, not as problems, but as neighbors. That winter was the first we spent without chains. It was brutal, cold winds, frozen toes, heavy snows, but also the first winter I heard my daughter sing while building a snowman. I never knew joy could sound like that. One night, Pastor Elijah invited us to a gathering. A dozen others seated in pews whispering stories of escape. Some had lost loved ones. Others bore lash marks beneath their coats. But all of them shared something. They were free. I stood up to speak. My voice shook at first. "I don't know what I am anymore," I said. "I was a slave, a father, a carpenter, a runaway, and now I don't know. Someone in the back said gently, "You're a survivor." Another added, "You're a builder, that's enough," and I wept. Because being enough was new to me. Weeks passed. I started working with Willis. Naomi learned to write her name. Lena talked of starting her own dress shop. We were becoming something. Not just escaping, becoming. But I never forgot the road behind us or those who didn't make it, or the man I had been. The one who lifted a hammer not to build, but to break the chains wrapped around his life. So if you're still with me, if this journey has moved you, pushpin hit that subscribe button. Speech balloon drop a comment about your dream, because we all deserve one. Repeat button share this story, so the names they tried to erase can still be heard. Because freedom isn't a finish line, it's a road we walk together. There are moments that pass so quietly, you don't realize they've changed you. One of those moments came on a spring morning in our new home. I found Naomi sitting by the window, writing something in the sunlight. When I asked what it was, she said, "A letter to the grandmother I never met." It stopped me cold, because I hadn't said her name in years, not since the auction block tore me from her hands. Naomi looked up and said, "Do you think she ever wondered what happened to you?" My voice caught. I nodded, but the truth was, I didn't know if my mother had survived that first winter without me. That night I couldn't sleep, so I sat by the fire and took out the small pouch I had carried all the way from Georgia. Inside it was the only thing I had left from home, a scrap of blue fabric, faded, frayed. It had been wrapped around my wrist the day I was born. My mother tied it there, said it was a prayer. That thread had seen whips, storms, blood, and tears. But it held just like her, just like me. I began to write, not for sending, but for remembering. Dear Mama, I made it. It took years and more nights in the dark than I can count. But I made it. I held your memory when I had nothing else to hold. Your voice sang in my ear when no one else dared speak. I thought of you when I was broken, and I built again because I knew you'd want me to. I have a daughter now. She has your eyes, sharp, full of questions, and your spirit, loud, untamed, unbroken. I told her about you, about the time you taught me to carve wood with your garden knife, about how you called me your little tree, because I was meant to grow tall, even if I started in a storm. She asked if I think you ever got free. I told her yes. Even if your body stayed in bondage, your spirit was never theirs to own. I married a woman named Lena. She's fierce in the quiet way, the kind who can sew a dress and stitch a plan into it. We've lost together. We've escaped together. We've escaped together. And we've built a life on the ashes of the one they tried to bury us in. Mama, I still carry the guilt for what I did in that barn, for the hammer, for the silence that followed. But I also carry this. My hands, once forced to build for others, now build for my people. Every home, every bench, every door frame I touch, I think of you. I think of freedom as something we earned, together. The letter never left my pocket, but the next morning Naomi saw me holding it. She said, "I think she heard you, and somehow I believed her." From that day on, we began writing letters we never planned to send. Naomi wrote to friends still in hiding. Lena wrote to her brother who was sold before she could say goodbye. I wrote to the boy I once was, to the man I had become, to the people I'd lost, to the man I killed, and to the man I'd yet to meet, the one who'd read this story long after I was gone. So if you're reading this, if you've followed my journey this far, know that your listening is a kind of freedom too, because every time a forgotten story is heard, every time a name once erased is remembered, we win again. Speech balloon, leave a comment. What would you say in a letter never sent? Pushpin, tap that subscribe button so we can keep telling the stories that history tried to silence. Repeat button, share this video, because someone out there might be carrying their own silence, and this might be the spark they need. They say when the wind passes through the pine trees just before dusk, you can hear voices, not screams, not words, but something like a hum, like memory trying to speak. I used to sit on the back porch when the sky turned copper, wondering if those voices were calling out to me, or warning me to turn back. Freedom wasn't the finish line, not for me. It was a new kind of battlefield. I had escaped chains, overseers, dogs, but the real war was inside. Every morning I woke up in a new place with no roots. My hands were calloused, not just from labor, but from holding on to a past I wasn't sure I wanted to remember. But forgetting, that felt like betrayal. So I carved our story into the world wherever I could. Not with pen and paper, but with hammers, bricks. Whispers passed from one safe house to the next. People came to me not just to learn carpentry, but to understand how to rebuild themselves. One of them, a boy named Elijah, once asked me, "Did it ever stop hurting?" I wanted to lie. Tell him yes. But lies are what kept us enslaved. So I told him the truth. No, but it gets quieter when you're building something that matters. In those years, I started writing letters. Not to send, just to say the words I'd never had the chance to speak. To Sarah, you were my dawn. In every storm, I searched for your face. To my mother, I never stopped looking for your eyes in every woman I passed. I hope you found peace somewhere, somehow. Those letters filled a shoebox, and that shoebox went with me everywhere. By now, the whispers of revolution had turned into headlines. People marched, shouted, demanded. Freedom was no longer a dream. It was on paper, in law books. But paper doesn't heal wounds. One evening, an old man came to the workshop. Said he heard I once swung a hammer not just for nails, but for justice. He asked, "Do you regret it?" I looked at my hands. Wrinkled, scarred, still strong, still strong. Regret isn't the word, I told him. Sometimes, the only way to protect life is to take it away from the hands that abuse it. I carry that choice like a nail in my chest. But I would make it again. Not out of anger, out of love. He nodded, placed a rusted horseshoe on my workbench and walked away. I never saw him again. Years passed. My children had children. They never saw the fields I did. But they knew the stories. I made sure of it. One day my granddaughter, bright eyes, skin like honey, asked me, "Grandpa, were you ever afraid?" I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was everything. Every single day, child, fear followed me like a shadow. But courage ain't the absence of fear. It's carrying it with you and walking anyway. She wrote that down, said she'd make it into a song. Maybe she did. As my body aged, the world spun faster. Machines replaced hands. Stories turned into textbooks. People forgot that history wasn't just dates. It was breathing, it had names, it had scars. So before I left this earth, I planted trees, dozens of them, each one named after someone I had lost, loved, or saved. Told the townsfolk, when the wind moves through these trees, remember, these are not just roots in soil, they're anchors in time, they're voices. And even now when I close my eyes, I can hear them. They're still walking. If you've stayed with me this far, know this. Stories like mine aren't rare, they're hidden. And it's time they were told. Subscribe to this channel if you believe memory matters. Share this story if you think the past still shapes the present. Comment below if you've ever felt like your voice was an echo, waiting to be heard. Because somewhere someone is listening. I never wanted revenge, only escape, but escape carries a price. Years after I rebuilt my life, after Isaiah became a man and took over the shop, a letter arrived. No name, just an address, Mississippi, and 3 words, "He is dying, the overseer." The one I had thought long dead, or perhaps had hoped was. The one whose shadow had stretched across my past, even after freedom. I stared at the paper. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from something worse. The possibility of return. I told no one, not Isaiah, not my wife. Yes, I had remarried. A quiet woman named Ruth who knew my nightmares, but not their source. I packed a small bag, took the night train, and didn't look back. Back in Mississippi, nothing had changed. The trees still whispered, the earth still smelled of blood and cotton. I found the old plantation house, abandoned, decaying. But in a side cabin, smaller than the others, I found him. Old, frail, eyes clouded by time. He didn't recognize me, or maybe he did. "You come to clean me," he croaked. I sat. He spoke in riddles. Of sons who never visited, of a name no longer feared, of fire, the fire I hadn't lit, but which had erased his master's house. "I watched it burn from the trees," he whispered. "Thought it was your doing, always wondered." I said nothing. "Why are you here?" I looked at him, at the thin skin stretched over shaking bones, at the monster made small by time. "To see if you were real," he laughed. A dry, bitter sound, too real always was. And then silence. He reached for a glass of water, dropped it. I bent to pick it up. Our hands touched, his eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw fear, not power, in them. "Forgive me," he rasped. I stood, my back straight, my voice calm. I already did the day I walked away, and I left. Back on the train, I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I just stared out the window as the past blurred behind me. When I returned, Isaiah was waiting at the station. "You went south," he said. I nodded. "Did you find what you were looking for?" I paused. "No, but I left behind what I didn't need." Closure isn't always fire. Sometimes it's silence. And silence finally is peace. I often wonder what remains after a storm passes. Not the broken trees, not the watermarks on the walls, but the quiet afterward. The silence that lingers, That silence, that's where I live now. I sit on a wooden chair outside the shop Isaiah now runs. He teaches boys with calloused hands how to measure twice and cut once. His laugh echoes across the yard. And I see myself in him, though he's better, freer than I ever was. People in the town know me as an old man who fixed roofs, carved furniture, and once built a church door that still swings smooth as butter. They don't know the rest. Most never ask. A few sense it. In my eyes maybe, but let it lie, and I'm thankful for that. Because I've learned that not all stories need to be shouted. Some are whispered, some are carved, some are handed down like tools. Naomi, yes, my granddaughter now, she writes. Stories, poems, little speeches she reads aloud at the church hall. Last Sunday she read one about a hammer. A hammer builds, but it also breaks chains, she said. Everyone clapped. I wiped a tear, because she never knew, not fully, what I did. But somehow she knows, and that's legacy, not statues or headlines. Legacy is a boy who never knew chains, a girl who speaks freely, a family that eats together on Sundays without fear. Legacy is the silence after the storm. Not because it forgets, but because it remembers with peace. I sometimes dream of the river. In the dream I stand by its edge. The water is calm but deep, and across it shadows wave. Welcoming. Mother is there. Sarah is there. My first daughter, the one I never held, she is there too. They don't speak, they just wait. And I smile, because I know the journey is not over, but it is complete. When that day comes, and it will, let them carve no grand word. Just this, he broke no chains with fire, nor sword, but with hands. And with hope, and maybe, just maybe, someone will pick up that same hammer and build something better. Thank you for walking this road with me. If this story moved you, share it, comment. Let others hear the echoes that still walk among us. Subscribe, because there are more truths waiting in the quiet, more storms and more silence after.